It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Slovenia. Here we go. Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and we continue Series 25 on the groups and players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Slovenia's players. Actually, it's part 2 of the Players Mediacast, and here we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to that in the show notes. This episode will be divided into 2 sections. In section 1, we look over the list that we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 2, we summarize surprises in the selections and review injury. Let's begin then, and we'll begin by just taking a look at the preliminary squad here. So on May 21st, Slovenia released a 30-man preliminary squad. So 30 players there, and on June 7th they cut that down to the required 26 players, so they cut 4 players. So we are going to see 4 players in a blue highlight. That'll indicate they made the preliminary squad and not the final squad, and 26 players in a green highlight, and those will be our players for the cup. Okay, let's move on. Well, we'll begin with the manager, who will consider having made the squad. He didn't lose his job coming up to the cup there. And on to goalkeepers. So we had a definite candidate in Jan Oblak, who was, of course, selected, and a definite candidate, a likely candidate in Vid Balac, also selected, and actually those two each started one of their warm-up games. A bit of a surprise here in the likely candidate, Matevž Vidovcek, who was not selected for the squad. He was brought into the camp for the game for the prior to the camp anyway. He didn't make the final cut, so on the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut, and taking his place was our possible candidate Igor Vekic, and he was selected for the squad. So a bit of a surprise there. Possible but unlikely candidate Martin Turk was not selected. On we go to defenders and central defenders. So we have Jaka Bijol as the definite candidate, and he was selected. And 2 likely candidates, Miha Blažić and Vanja Drukusic, also selected, both of our likely candidates. David Bracalo, a possible candidate, was selected for the squad. And actually, we forgot to put a player on the list there, a possible candidate, Marcel Ratnik. He was not selected anyway. However, possible but unlikely candidate Zan Zaletel was selected for the squad, but just made the preliminary squad. There's Zan Zaletel. So those are the central defense. And in the warm-up games, we had a 2-man central defense, and it was Bijol and Drukusic in the first of the 2 warm-up games, and then Bijol and Bracalo in the second. So Bijol, the main man there. Okay, over to the left back position, and we have 2 likely candidates, Eric Janza and Jure Balkovic, and both of them were selected for the cup. Eric Janza started both of the warm-up games there. Over to the right back position, Zan Karnitschnik Having a bit of trouble with my tongue here. Zan Kornichnik is a selection for the final squad, and in fact started both of the warm-up games. He's the only candidate over on this side, but we do have Petar Stojanovic who might sub in if Kornichnik is not available. Okay, that is it for the defense. So we move on to the midfield. And we do have a new candidate here in defensive midfielders. So we'll introduce him. It's Adrian Zeljkovic, and he was selected for the squad. And I'll just introduce him here. He is 22 years old and has one cap. That was in the warm-up games here. So, no, it wasn't. It was actually in the January friendly with the USA, where a lot of new players were tried out. He had started one of their remaining 3 games to up until March 2023. And after starting that game, he had been with the other with the under-21 team. So we actually hadn't even put him on the list because there were several other players in the same situation. We didn't want to confuse him. But he was brought back in. Actually didn't appear in either of the warm-up games there, but nevertheless on the squad, Adrian Zeljkovic. Okay, let's go back to the candidates we did have. We had 2 likely candidates, Sandy Lovrich, who was selected, and John Gorenc Stankovic, also selected for the squad. Among the central midfielders, we had a definite candidate in Adam Gnezda Serin and Tumi Max Elsnik. Both of those definite candidates, both of them selected. We also had likely candidate Jasmine Kurtic selected for the squad. Miha Zach, our possible candidate, was selected for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut there. So Miha Zach not selected. And that's a lot of candidates. Let's look and see quickly what they did in the warm-up game. So it was a 3-man midfield in a 4-3-3 formation, and Gnezda Serin was the center player in both of them, and Horvat, who is not on this list, we'll meet him shortly, was on the right side in both cases, the right midfielder. Only the left midfielder changed. It was Kurtic in the first game and Elsnich in the second. Okay, we move on to left and right midfielders. We have no candidates for left midfielder, but the player we just mentioned, Tommy Horvat, was a candidate on the right side, only a possible candidate there, but he was selected for the squad, and as we saw, started both at the warm-up games there, so might be a starter. On upfield to the left wingers, we reorganized, or we organized things a little bit differently for Slovenia. So we kind of separated left wingers from left attackers here. So we had Benjamin Burbic as a likely candidate, and also Jan Malakar. I think we moved Malakar ahead of Burbic, thinking him slightly more likely. Okay, and it turns out Malakar, we were right, basically. Malakar started both warm-up games as a left forward there. So Malakar actually is coded as a forward, but we had moved him to this position. Right wingers, we have a player I mentioned who might act as a backup for the right defense position. In fact, he's coded as a right defender, Petar Stojanovic, but we had moved him up here because he played as a winger more. We also have Nino Zugelj as a possible candidate. He too was selected, so both of them here, Stojanovic and Nugelj. And there we go. On we go to attacking midfielders. And the biggest surprise of all here, the return of Josip Ilicic. So we'll put him in as a new candidate here, but in fact he's anything but new. New in the sense that we didn't have him on the list when we went over it. And the reason we didn't have him on the list is that he had been off the team for quite a while. He returned after a 2.5-year absence when he came in for the warm-up games. He subbed into both of those and scored a goal. So good thing they brought him back. So Josip Ilicic, 36 years old, with 81 caps and 17 goals for Slovenia, and currently playing for Maribor, his second stint with Maribor in Slovenia since 2022, but he was with Atalanta in Italy before that, and some other Italian clubs as well, including Fiorentina. So bringing the veteran back in here, and they'll hope he'll be scoring goals in the cup too. We also had, so the only candidate we actually had on our list originally was possible but unlikely Luka Zahovic, and Luka Zahovic was selected for the preliminary squad but didn't make the final cut there. All right, on to forwards. Oh, and I should say the starting right forward in 4-4-3 was neither of those players, as we saw. Ilicic just subbed in. It was the forward Andras Sporar, who we're going to meet right away here. So let's look at the forward selection. Benjamin Sesko we had as a definite candidate. Andras Sporar, who we just mentioned, had been a likely candidate, and he was selected, along with the other likely candidate, Zan Vipotnik. And finally, we had possible candidate Zan Selar, and he also was selected. So all four of the candidates here. We saw that Andras Sporar started as the right forward in the 4-3-3 in both games. The centre forward was Vipotnik in game one, in the first warm-up game, and Sesko in the second one. But we still see Sesko as the starting forward there. Okay, that brings us to the end of our look at the selections. Those are your 26 players, and we go on to just review surprises and injuries here. So notable non-selections, really, there's just the goalkeeper that we saw. We had seen Matev's Vidovcek as a likely candidate, but in fact he was pipped by the possible candidate there. So Vidovcek not selected. Surprise selections, Josip Ilic, the veteran, basically coming out of international retirement to come back in, or I'm not sure if he had actually retired or just wasn't being selected anymore, but anyway, he's back. And Adrian Zelkovic, the defensive midfielder, added to the squad and selected for the final squad. We also had two players who were slightly surprising, Zan Zaletel and Luka Zahovic. Both of those had been possible but unlikely candidates, and I suppose it's not a surprise that they were selected for the preliminary squad and then cut, because that kind of fits in with their participation record over the past period. But anyway, slightly surprising. So new players, we mentioned once again Josip Ilicic, not a new player at all, but new in that we hadn't covered him in part one because he seemed to be off the team. And Adrian Zelkovic here once again. On the injuries front, nothing to report. Slovenia fortunate to have no injury concerns here, and so we can wipe out all of that and put no injuries concerned. No injury concerns. All right, that brings us to the end of our look at Slovenia, and yeah, we hope the mediacast here is is helping you to familiarize yourself with the team so that you can enjoy watching them more when the players who step onto the field are known entities. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Big Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.